The following is a conversation. It has the features of any conversation, such as imperfectly expressed thoughts, ill-considered opinions, and the notions of several sleep-deprived brains. Try not to get your stethoscope in a twist about it.
Woodrow Wilson, they've scrubbed his name at Princeton University because of
because he was the worst president in history on civil liberties. Yeah, that's fair. Woodrow Wilson, top 5 worst presidents we've had for sure.
Is that the one where we have a museum in Iowa? Is he?
No, that's Hoover.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, yeah, Hoover's on the list.
Is he also in top 5? Damn.
He just didn't know what he was doing.
He tried.
He's the only one from Iowa, though, so.
Is he?
Yeah, he's also the only one that went to Stanford, so it's the two, yeah.
I had no idea we had presidential scholars in our midst.
Yeah, man. You know me.
I feel like I gotta go.
I was gonna say, the only thing I know about Herbert Hoover is from the Little Orphan Annie.
Not bad.
I mean, that's
not
one
bad.
way to know it.
There's a dam named after him.
That only because I was in the play as a first grader or something.
You Annie?
Yeah, I was the narrator.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, that's a perfect role for you. You got that good narrator voice.
I mean, even back then.
He's 6-year-old.
Even back then, I had
Is that Morgan Freeman?
Deep baritone.
Yeah, the teachers didn't know what to do with me because I would get up on stage and be like, "Hello, everybody."
It was a hard knock life.
Meandering in the margins of medicine, it's the Shortcoat Podcast.
Weird news,
fresh views,
helpful clues, and interviews.
By students, for students.
Subscribe to Power with Michelle at theshortcoat.com.
Welcome back to the Shortcoat Podcast, the show that gives you an inside look at medical school from the students drinking from that fire hose. It's a production of the University of Iowa Harvard College of Medicine. I'm Dave Eller. Before we get going on the episode today, I do need to visit the financial aid office because our sponsor this week is the Mayo Clinic Press. The drugs we have long trusted to help kill pain are now killing us. But what if we were equipped with the information to use opioids wisely, store them safely, avoid their risk, and reverse their problems? Ending the Crisis is the groundbreaking new book from addiction specialist Dr. Holly Geyer, and draws upon the learnings of the award-winning Mayo Clinic Opioid Stewardship Program and goes beyond the history and causes of the opioid epidemic to offer a real solution. Ending the Crisis reinvests Mayo Clinic's collective expertise into the lives of every person struggling with the effects of opioid addiction. It's available now wherever fine books are sold, so go get your copy of Ending the Crisis today. And thank you so much for the support, Mayo Clinic Press. Let's get back to the podcast because with me today in the SCP studio and via the internet are some really good-looking medical students. You can see what they look like over on our YouTube channel, but before you do that, do not make comments about his contouring. And so I'm going to put some links in the show notes. M1 Jason Goddard. Resources that you can use.
No, it's not.
But the bottom line is that for what it's worth,
it's definitely not.
I know you're out there. I wish I could do more. Maybe I can.
It's like, where?
The first second you were talking about me, and I was like, okay.
I don't know what is wrong with me. It's M1 Jeff Goddard, who's beautifully contoured today.
Thank you. It's the lighting.
Please pretend to be blasé about the beauty of M1 Trent Gilbert.
Hey guys,
stop speculating about whether he's had work done. It's M4 Mason Valancourt.
It's because I have.
Yeah. Valancourt, excuse me.
Valancourt nailed it.
Change your name.
Messed mine up 10 minutes after I told you what it was. Slip it. Do you smell toast right now? Are you okay?
I'm a moron.
You're not a moron.
And take a deep breath before you mention how great she looks on Zoom. It's M4 Talia Saab.
Thank you. My mom is beautiful. That's where I get it.
Awesome. Can we talk a little bit about whether or not I'm a normal human being when it comes to names? I mean, I really have a major problem. And I think it's because it's been drilled into me, get people's names right. And then when the name comes up, I freeze. Or my brain just stops working.
You can do what I do. I don't actually know the names of 95% of the people that have lectured to us so far in medical school. I wait till somebody makes eye contact and then I start talking. You don't need names.
Okay. But I do need names for this show.
That's fair. Good luck.
Hey,
he specifically told you how to say it. And you still got it wrong. I don't
welcoming M1 that guy. Like
this guy over here.
Try so hard. Talia, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but why have you joined us from the internet today?
Oh, so I am in Des Moines right now. I'm doing a health policy elective here at the Capitol. So
what do you do in a health policy elective? Do you go hang out with legislators and?
Yeah, so it's an elective you can take as an M4, and so you get paired with some people from different lobbyist groups. There's like another medical student doing it with me right now, so we got some different teaching on like how to make your points, how to appeal to different moral foundations, and we find bills we're interested in and care about and go to like meetings and try to talk to legislatures. And yeah, it's interesting. It's a different world.
Is it a world you're comfortable in?
No, but I'm not comfortable in many situations. I think that's just I'm just an awkward person. So
just generally uncomfortable. That's
my baseline. But definitely, yeah, no.
What's something that you've learned about this world while you've been doing this? It
is way more like a high school cafeteria than I thought it was going to be. Like there's definitely the cliques and little like, factions and gossip and this kind of like tit for tat thing too of like, oh, if I do this for them and they'll help me with this. And I don't know, there's, I don't know. We all like to think that policies are always based on good science, and I'm not going to get too far down this path. There's a whole different there are a variety of ways that people approach policies and how they decide on whether something is a good policy or not. And sometimes you agree with people and sometimes you scratch your head and you're like, I have no idea how you got to where you are with this right now. It's just like, I don't know.
Do you see yourself in a health policy role in the future?
I don't know.
Or is this just like a one and done? Like, okay, well, this is too strange.
It's been a really great learning experience, and there is something that is exciting and feels meaningful about trying to advocate for policies that affect people's health, because we know that so much of people's health is determined not by like what happens in the doctor's office, but all these other things. So I think I'd like to be involved in that more in the future, but also, I don't know, it's been like taxing in a different way than what I'm used to.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Okay.
TBD.
Are you part of the track, the health policy delivery track or whatever?
I am, yeah. And I believe Mason is on leadership for that. So.
Oh, look at that. I'll talk to you after.
We'll chit chat.
Well, whatever happens, seems like an interesting, valuable experience.
That's the beauty of electives. Not everything's going to hit, like clinical or not. Like it's about finding what doesn't work for you. It's better that, to learn about it now than maybe you're trying to do it later and invest more of your important time.
I think that it is incredibly valuable to learn that even at the highest level of organization for our society, being our governments, right? People have all kinds of motivations for the decisions that they're making, including sometimes, hopefully, evidence, but not always.
Yeah.
And it just is what it is. And you do your best to work with the people that we have, right?
It must be so hard to cultivate that attitude, though. Like you have the evidence, right? You have the evidence. You're trying to convince people of, let's make a policy that pays attention to the evidence rather than other things. And time again, that's probably a difficult case to make. But it's an important case to keep trying to make.
Policy is, I just finished a phenomenal book. For the book readers out there, I'm going to go ahead and make a plug. There are these two brothers, Chip and Dan Heath. They write a lot. Dan recently finished a book a couple years ago called Upstream, where he talks about trying to solve problems upstream and what that looks like. And he spends a large part of the book talking about preventive medicine and how much money we don't spend on the things that are upstream, and how much we therefore have to spend downstream. And one of the things he talks about is, different programs that take, decades to get done. It's if you go into policy, you're in it for the long haul. You have to be a very patient individual.
Yeah.
But you do what you can.
Well, today I wanted to focus on some of the myths that surround medical practice and medical education. Things we've all heard online in TV shows and movies and from friends and family, but which are at least a little bit wrong. Any come to mind off the top of your head that you want to start us off with?
I've got one.
Yeah.
I always have one. I'm sorry, guys.
I would be disappointed if you didn't.
Law and Order SVU, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
Within the last couple of years, aired an episode wherein they accused a potential perpetrator of wanton endangerment of others because they were HIV positive, but their counts were undetectable and they had intercourse with another person, and they blatantly shared the information that it was still possible for them to be infecting other people, which is not true, and probably puts people that are HIV positive at a little bit of social risk for them to be sharing that particular myth, right? So don't believe that, listeners out there.
Yeah. I think it's probably fair to say that if you're getting your medical ideas from television shows or movies or things like that, it's probably not going to be quite right.
Yeah, check your facts, may as well.
Any others that you want to start us off with?
I was thinking the other day of the whole burnt food and cancer risk conversation, because I've heard that just come up
Really?
I don't think I've heard that one. So,
well, they've done studies on it. I didn't spend that much time looking into it, but I heard the 10th remark, and I finally was like, well, I should look this up and see.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the way it goes with all these studies is just well, we didn't find any association, right? But you can't, you can never be definitively, I guess there might be a marginal risk. There's some compound when you burn things that they're oh, maybe it's a carcinogen, but
okay.
It kind of reminds me of if you ever go to California, everywhere you go, you have these warnings. X might be a carcinogen.
Oh, sure.
Or this is known to the state of California to be only California knows this. Everybody else is not in the loop, let me tell you.
And if you ever go on a jet bridge, it'll be Prop 45 warning, jet fuel is a known carcinogen. And I'm just sitting there really? You mean to say that breathing in jet fuel might be a problem for me?
I'm interested in the people who are oh shit, I guess I can't go on vacation, and they turn around and leave the jet bridge.
Well, yeah, and I think Prop 45 is really interesting because they basically end up having to become the Mythbusters on does X cause cancer?
Yeah.
Because if something does, then you have to add it to the list of things that you have to put up signs about. And I don't know. I think it would be really interesting, but probably depressing to be sitting on that panel.
On the subject of cancer, I've got a couple. First, Linus Pauling, a two-time Nobel Prize winning scientist, tried to push for years that you need to take vitamin C because it would stop all kinds of ailments. Yeah. Turns out if you do what he did was macro dosing, I think 10,000 milligrams a day. At some point, he and his wife both died of stomach cancers because too much vitamin C will give you cancer. Crazy, because it just eats your stomach lining. And
that's the whole. This ties into the whole. If you take more of it, it'll work better.
Yeah, turns out dosing really matters.
That a lot of people think. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have enough water, you die. But turns out if you have too much water, you can also die. Yeah. Right? Dosing is very important in almost everything we do.
I'm glad you've warned me about the burned food thing.
You're just going to ruin marshmallows for him forever.
I didn't know that.
I don't think it does cause cancer. I'm saying that's a myth that people propagate.
I know. I'm just thinking of all the burned foods that I've made.
Right.
Because that's
all that creme brulee.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh God, I love creme brulee. Damn it.
Okay, can I share one?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So my mom has been watching Grey's Anatomy recently.
I knew this was going to come up.
Me. She was like, I've learned that at hospitals to watch out for supply closets and what doctors might be doing in there. Which, she's saying it in jest, but just the thought, no one's having sex at the hospital. It's the least sexy place imaginable. So yeah. I think people generally know that, all right, it's, people aren't really getting it on in supply closets and call rooms, but just want to emphasize to the nth degree, there is really nothing sexy about the hospital.
I think Jeff got a look on his face, though, he's not certain he believes that, which makes me wonder what's been going on in supply rooms where Jeff's around, but...
I'm not saying it's every hospital. I'm not saying it's every specialty, but having worked in an emergency department, There's a certain type of personality that gets attracted to emergency medicine. They like a certain level of thrill in their lives.
Oh my gosh.
I had not considered this.
And
I've never gone to the emergency department
There's always a little bit of drama based off of the couplings that happen. That's as far as I want to get into that subject.
Yeah. I think you brought up an interesting
supply closets and emergency rooms. Beware.
Yeah. Gotta be real careful in the emergency department opening up doors. Knock 7 times.
Oh, wow.
Is that a myth or not? Can we put that in the list of...
This is anecdotal evidence. I don't know if anybody's doing a randomized controlled trial of
is it the
chances of these things happening.
Is it the supply room?
No.
Jeff.
No. It's authorized personnel only doors. Behind those, it's more the personnel have trouble walking in on people, but just things that I have seen.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a trial done on this, like maybe a sampling of, these authorized personnel rooms and emergency departments across the country. See, like, how often when you open one of these doors is someone,
Can you imagine submitting that IRB?
Have you ever seen a
I'm just gonna bust
over
into busting into break rooms. See what I can find.
It's funny that like that's a plot on like sitcoms too. Like there's like I remember like a Friends episode where that's a topic and it's I feel like every writer on a sitcom is just like what's comedy gold, supply closets and hospitals.
The fact though that this is a trope at all, because I mean these things come about. Most myths I think probably come about out of something. They have a bit of truth to them, right?
I would say Sam Shim popularized this trope.
Right.
Yeah.
He's the author of
House of God,
which practically every...
I was told to read it, and I finally read part of it. It's so smutty, and it was just a little much for me. I was like, where's the medicine in here? Like, this feels...
Yes, it is. It is a very sexual book, gratuitously so.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you could edit that part out, there's a lot of really good cultural information that 50 years later is still quite relevant to people going into residency. So
he has a new book.
He does. Man's Fourth Best Hospital.
Yes.
I recently read it, and that one made me a little sad. But
okay,
it's a good book. It ends on an unfortunate note.
Okay.
But on the subject of myths and medicine, I've got another one.
Okay.
I just want everybody to know that I love birds. But Rachel Carson did us a disservice by propagating certain beliefs around DDT that were unfounded. Some things were true, right? They did make eggshells thinner. I couldn't tell you how much of a detriment that was to the bird populations, but her data were non-existent. So the fact that she just made up things about, I think I see less birds. She wasn't even a professional bird watcher. It's not like,
Who was Rachel Carson?
She's like the most famous environmentalist of the last 100 years. Okay. She wrote a book called Silent Springs, which is where we get this idea that DDT was harmful. Several of the other things that she propagated about DDT were that it caused all kinds of childhood leukemias and cancers and stuff, which was not true. But if you believe that, I mean, that was a death sentence at the time, right?
Or at least there was no evidence for it?
Well, I mean now that there is evidence to the contrary, right? Okay. But she was making unfounded claims.
Yeah, when I think DDT, which I don't often think DDT because it's probably not around much anymore, but
it was banned worldwide.
Right.
The WHO has, within the last 15 years, unbanned it for the use against pesticides. The reason why this is important is because I want to say between like 1960 and 1973, the rate of malaria in India went from 100 million. I mean, this is obviously a very large population, a very dense population, but 100 million or something like that to thousands from literally like that's several orders of magnitude of people that had the chance of living because of using DDT to limit mosquitoes. So this myth has indirectly caused the deaths of millions upon millions of people in the last 50 years.
So maybe an overarching myth would be that all decisions in medicine get made on the basis of science.
Oh yeah. Oof. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
What a world that would be.
I've heard about DDT in the context of they attributed its banning to the resurgence of bedbugs in the U.S. And obviously, I don't know how much harm really comes. I mean, it's not
because
malaria.
It was banned, all these bed bugs are now
DDT was like a really effective bed bug approach, and without it, they have a much harder time eradicating them.
Yeah.
Let me Sorry, continue that.
No, that's it.
It's just the bed bug thing.
But let me tell you about the harms of bed bugs. I had bed bugs during the pandemic, like the beginning of it, and then had to take everything to the laundromat and like while the exterminator was there. And then I was supposed to be on some like Zoom didactic session at the same time, and the Wi-Fi didn't work at the laundromat. It was a whole mess. Next morning, so I got back home after the exterminator. You know, we did all the right things. I woke up the next morning and there was a bed bug on me, and I couldn't handle it. I think that's the closest I've ever come to like a mental breakdown, was that finding that bed bug on me after doing all that stuff with the, anyways.
That's horrible.
So, it's fine. They eventually got rid of the bed bugs, but all I'm saying is that
I would rather live in a world without bed bugs. I think that's fair. Yeah. That said, turns out maybe DDT isn't as harmful as we thought it was.
Yeah. Especially if you're suffering from bed bugs.
I do love birds. I want everybody to know that. I am for having birds.
Okay. You're not you're not one of those anti-bird people.
No.
Are they real though is the next question.
It broke my heart the other day when I saw that they're using taxidermied birds for drones now.
What?
Crazy. So it's not like it looks like a real bird, right? But it's like a taxidermied bird, just like full wingspan, and they're putting drones in it so that they can survey.
Everyone.
Specifically surveyors, so people that are trying to survey bird populations and other wildlife. So
that is a real big you to the birds that they're
right?
looking at.
Could you imagine? You're just like, you've got this taxidermy condor flying around trying to count how many condor are left. Like, ooh, I don't know, man.
You're not going to have any balloons floating over the U.S. anymore.
It's
just going to be taxidermied birds.
I hope the Chinese aren't listening.
Is that a chicken in the air? Like,
could you imagine? Like, they don't even bother like having the wings out. It's just gonna be.
Gee, I've never seen an eagle fly at 60,000 feet.
Oh my God!
Just imagine the other birds being like, John, we thought you were dead.
John hasn't said. He didn't say anything to me.
Jesus, when you talk about their friend's corpse flying around, that's a tough look.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Jesus. Who is the sick bastard who first posed this and was like, guys, I know that this is a little weird, but hear me out.
It was guarantee a conservationist who said, you know what, drones are really good for our job, but they just look so ugly.
Yeah.
You know what would look better? A dead bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the cell towers disguised as trees.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that wasn't on the list of things I was going to talk about today, but I'm really glad we did. Really glad we did.
Yeah, we brought that up.
Shortcoats, we love to hear from you, no matter what it's about. So call us at 347-SHORT-CT with questions, shower thoughts, complaints about your situation, whatever you like. We'll talk about it on the show. I got one. Doctors and med students are geniuses. Do you guys feel like geniuses?
Less and less every day.
Uh-huh.
If you had asked me yesterday, I might have been inclined to think that I was maybe above average intelligence. And then I took this immunological test today, and I feel like, whew, that one hurt my feelings.
Yeah,
you are above average intelligence. I mean, I'm confident of that.
I am less and less confident of that. Mason has a point.
I think, like, obviously they screen for, having decently high intellect, go to medical school. But I find, like, a lot of medical practice just comes from experience and hard work. Mm-hmm. I think intellect helps, but not ridiculously necessary. Yeah.
There's a certain threshold of you have to be able to pass multiple choice exams. So like that is like a baseline component. And if you could do that, well, then you can become a doctor, like by the law of like you pass your different board exams. But then like what makes like really standout doctors is usually the things off the intelligence page, or it's the emotional intelligence side of things and how they're going to synthesize information and then find with a patient what's the best like in between. I think that's an intelligence we don't like necessarily select for it intentionally, we don't have a good way to. We try and get at it, but like if I think of like a theoretical physicists who like are just like cranking out math, and that's all I know about it, and I'm just like, that's intelligence to me. That's a real like creative problem solving, high engine stuff. I'm just like, hey, that looks weird on a screen. We should like talk about it. Mm-hmm. Like I just feel like I'm a much more simple person.
I appreciate that you brought up that, yeah, there's different types of intelligence. My partner is very intelligent in ways that I'm not. He's able to fix anything. And there are times that's just not a skill I don't have. And there are times where he's like, how are you almost a doctor? Because I'm just so bad at a lot of like daily life things.
Daily life things.
Yeah, like just basic. I don't know. I don't want to.
You don't need to know how a vacuum works to be a good cardiologist. It's just not relevant, you know? Like, you can forget the names of half of the states in the union, and you're going to be really awkward at parties, but you can also still be a pretty good neurosurgeon, you know? Like, that's okay. It's just you're putting all of your, like, if you guys like video games, you're just putting all of your skill points in, like, one skill. You're just maxing out medical knowledge, and everything else is just... who cares?
Yeah, I min-max that hard. It's just, there was a presidential conversation happening before the show, and
who's a president? I don't know.
That's what does a president do? So yeah, that's definitely, I have not developed that skill tree.
I want to know what Talia is especially bad at around I don't know, the home. Is that what you were implying?
I'll just say I'm a very messy person.
Oh, okay.
To the point where like my partner would question, he was like, Did you even like do chores growing up? Which, yes, I did. We had, I had my weekly chores to get my allowance I had to do. But, I just like to think of myself as a free spirit, the bounds of society or say a dresser or other organizational system, it's just too confining for me. So
this is something that I can certainly relate to. My mom came to visit this past May, and we had a rare argument because she was like, got a nice house. This was the first time she'd been. Got a nice house. Could use some work on the details of cleaning. And I'm like,
rough.
Thanks, Mom.
Roasted. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't care about stuff like that. It's just not, it's just not what I don't care that the track in the door, in the sliding glass door is filthy. It's just not something I'm going to worry about.
If it makes you two feel better, it takes me about 30 minutes to put a duvet cover on, and I always come out sweaty and angry. So I never want my patients to see me after that.
If it makes all of you feel better, I have literally no idea what a duvet cover even is. So
good. Oh man, I do feel better.
I feel like I'm in serious trouble over here. Maybe I'm a fancy doctor. I'll know words like duvet.
Duvet. How about doctors are rich?
Okay, you know what? Here's the thing. No, yes, they are. The median income in this country is $60,000. The average physician makes $200,000 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're rich.
Yeah.
Okay.
See,
and I get that they have debt, and I get that life doesn't necessarily get easier just because you have a little bit more money or a lot more money. But by the standards of most human beings in this country, yes.
Yeah. I think it's important to acknowledge that, by the standards of, many people in the U.S., we're doing just fine.
I'm willing to bet that there are doctors in this country that just bought eggs. They didn't even think about it.
They bought eggs.
They just didn't even slow down. Yeah. I'm going to get 2 dozen a day. Why not? You know?
Rich bastards.
If you want another good book, I read a lot. Sorry, guys.
We need to have Jeff's book club.
Jeff's book corner. Just like Jeff's book hour. I read this book a few years ago called The Broken Ladder. I'm sorry, I can't tell you the authors off the top of my head, but essentially the point of the story was that income is less indicative of your social and mental health and physical health than comparative income. And areas that have higher social or wealth inequality have worse health outcomes than areas that have lower absolute wealth but more wealth equality. So that said, I think probably one of the reasons why a lot of doctors feel like they aren't very wealthy is all of their friends are doctors, right? Especially people like residents who are making $60,000, $70,000 a year.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And they've got an attending over here that's making $350,000 a year. They feel poor, you know? Even though they don't really have to worry about housing insecurity, you know? They don't really have to worry about whether or not they'll be able to afford going to the hospital if they get sick. They still feel a huge disparity. And I'm sure that still weighs on them. So that's fair. It is all relative. Also, stop comparing yourself to other people. But, you know.
Yeah, that's hard. A human nature problem.
Yeah, it's literally like impossible to not. But
yeah. I think what's also helpful to keep in mind, because I think that doctors is rich thing also comes from a place of that's why healthcare is so expensive. But when you look at contributors to cost of healthcare, like the salaries of physicians can be up to like 8 to 10%. But that's still like paling in comparison of drugs, devices, and everything else that's making up the rest of that pie. And it's also the fact that physicians are trading off a lot of time for a higher income. So at some point, like if we don't balance that, or unless we make medical school free universally and drop physician salaries, like that's a different type of investment. But at some point, you've got to like justify, you know, the investment you're putting in. I'm looking at the end of the day, post high school, I'll be 6, 11, you know, like 19 years of training while my friends are making income and I'm, you know, working a lot. So it's like, I will be rich one day. But in this interim, it's like understanding that there's a lot of like discrepancy. Like I'll be a doctor in May and I have some family members that are like, oh, so you're rich now. It's like, no, not at all.
I'm also finishing up here in May and I have $170,000 of student debt. So you don't feel very rich when that's the case. And yeah, you can look at things and be like, eventually one day I'll have my debt paid off. That'll be probably 15, 20 years. But it's, you know, when again, it's like your friends who took different paths that didn't require as much schooling or say like, you know, established in their careers, having families, making good salaries. And you're like, I'm 29 and I have almost $200,000 of debt. You don't feel very rich.
How about this one? Doctors must be healthy to be good at their jobs. And by healthy, I don't mean that they don't have illnesses, but that they don't look healthy. Like doctors.
Like jaundice?
No. Like, you know, things like overweight or I'm not sure I'm putting this quite correctly.
So the myth is that if doctors
you can't be a good doctor if you're overweight. Or you can't be a good doctor if you don't, you know, look like you take care of your body.
So I think it's probably a spectrum, right? So somebody who has lung cancer might feel like their oncologist who smokes on his breaks is a little disingenuous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fair. I think that it kind of depends on what you're going for. I think that you might have more moral authority in the sense that, not that you're right or wrong, but in the sense that you can kind of back up what you're saying.
Sure.
It's like going to a personal trainer. Like it's the one that's fit that I'm going to trust a little bit more emotionally to get me where he's going, even if he's saying the exact same thing as the guy next to him who is, you know, skinnier than I am, right? The better you take care of yourself as a doctor, the more emotional impact sometimes your advice can be taken with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your advice is better. It's just people might listen more.
Yeah, where possible, follow your own advice.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, especially with respect to weight in particular, it's such a difficult problem to manage for your average person that I don't think doctors are exempt from that situation, you know. So if a doctor has, for instance, a weight problem, you know, to ascribe it to their behavior and thus to say that they should be doing better is a kind of a problematic viewpoint, because I think at this point we know that, you know, behavior is important, but it's not as easy as just saying, well, fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of internalized fat phobia, I mean, in society and within medicine as well, where, you know, just because someone's fat doesn't mean that they like don't exercise or don't eat well. Like there's a lot of assumptions you're making about someone's health if you're just making it based off of weight. So like, yeah, that's problematic.
Here's one I feel strongly about. Doctors are only serious and professional.
Have you met me? Well, I guess they haven't given me the title yet, but they're going to soon, and I'm going to bring the whole seriousness level down several notches for the whole profession.
I want my doctor to be serious in some situations, right? But I would be much happier knowing that my doctor, is a goofball also, I think.
Yeah, it's like, people aren't often one or the other. And I think people if you're in the emergency department and you're having something serious going on, you want your doctor to be like top of their game. You want her to be just like focused like a laser. But
I want my doctor to be Fozzie Bear in that situation.
I don't understand the reference, but good.
I got you, Dave. I'm here for you.
But anyways, I find a lot of people are just really good natured in general too. So it's like, that I think doctors are like goofier, more personable on average than many other people, or maybe that's just people I hang around with.
I feel like it just comes about. I think the professionalism component, I think, is important. Like it is important that the medical profession stays professional in a lot of regards. But the thing that I think needs to adjust is like our expectations of what it means to be professional.
Thank you.
Like I think there's like a way you can view it erroneously where like a professional person is serious all the time. But I think like there's a lot of room to be a very professional person and, still be personable and relatable and at the same time not doing inappropriate things.
Well, what's inappropriate?
That's the question at the end of the day.
So this goes back to this is a flashback to an episode that you guys did several years ago, well before I was here, about that poor dumb medical student or resident or whatever he was that decided to see how professional physicians were online, and he docked points to female physicians because they had bathing suit photos on their Facebooks or whatever.
Yeah, we talked about that a couple of times. Yeah.
Like, one, the problem with that is the fact that he was rushing for publications because he thought he needed it for the next job advancement, which is dumb enough as it is. But two, nobody is professional all of the time. Nobody is serious all of the time. People have to be able to, if you're in the room with a physician, I want them to, be somewhat professional with me, but when they're at home, sure, let it be idiots. I think we should honor people's right to be dumb in private. I love being dumb in private.
I've kind of made a career out of being dumb in public. So
true.
But I'm not a doctor, so I just represent a medical school. That's why in the early days of this show, I was often freaked out by the idea that somebody important might listen to it.
I also think you got to be careful with like professionalism being like too professional and stiff in the clinic room. I mean, my favorite thing to do is when I have patients like do like abduction at the shoulders, kind of like with their flapping their wings, I'll start quacking as I push on them. And I do it for patients who are 6 up to 90 and they all love it. But that it's so silly and stupid. But I think like that's then I get that special moment with them. We have a little fun with it. And I feel like those interactions afterwards always go so much more smoothly. So it's like you got to give yourself a little permission to be yourself, like in the clinic room, because otherwise you get the kind of the other myth of like doctors are just like they're never paying attention to you, they're just looking at their computer, which I'm not saying it's a myth that it doesn't happen, but like that's not all doctors are as humans. They are like, funny, artistic, creative people as well.
Doctors always have to be right.
We do. Mm-hmm. That's true.
100%.
Doctors are never
no
wrong.
Notes.
It's been thoroughly vetted that doctors cannot be wrong.
I think a skill you have to develop in medicine is acknowledging when you are wrong, because I think you have to first think, well, it's okay to be wrong sometimes, but then I think there are moments where it can be harmful to just keep insisting that you're right even though you know that you're wrong about something. So that's just a skill I think you have to develop.
So admitting that you were wrong, and also doing it in a way that you do it as early as possible.
And that's, to be fair with that myth, I don't think that, I would say that most doctors probably don't feel like they can't be wrong in their practice. I think most of them are reasonably terrified that they could be, right? But there is a hidden curriculum that you don't admit that you're wrong in a lot of places. Even if we are explicitly told that it's okay that we make mistakes as long as we own up to them and we try our best to repair them, the hidden curriculum at a lot of institutions is you can't make mistakes. You cannot be wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
that's terrifying.
And mistakes are costly. Like, let's be clear, especially in medicine, they're costly. I don't know that you can 100% avoid them, though.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's every industry's got their own thing, right? But like, if I'm trying to think of an example, if I'm a mechanic and I mess up and I end up damaging a part, that's going to cost me some money.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to cost somebody their life, right? And we're in a profession where if we make a mistake, it very well could. And so the intensity is problematic to being honest. But turns out patients and physicians have a better relationship and better quality of service if we can admit when mistakes are made. Everybody feels like the trust is a lot higher when we're able to comfortably say, a mistake was made here and I'm going to do my best to make reparations.
Medical school is cutthroat and competitive.
I think some of them are. Probably.
I think it's possible, yeah. My classmates spent all night sending me cheat sheets on the group chat. So by cheat sheets, I mean like study guides for the test that we had today.
Yeah, we call them cheat sheets. Nobody loves that term, but
yeah. No, they spent all night sending
study
me,
guide is
somehow better, right? All night they kept sending me their doodles to help memorize these different pathways in immunology. I don't think we're necessarily worried about that here. So very nice.
That's a nice thing of going to med school in Iowa.
Yeah.
I hear things about different med schools. I don't know. Hard to say because I've only ever gone to med school here.
Yeah.
But
I think like it's an interesting test of like what you expect of other people, because like you could come in here being like, well, they have this like near honors grade, which is on a percentile basis. And so, anybody trying to get that is never going to want to help other people because, well, if you help other people, then the median goes up and then so does the threshold for near honors. And I think there's like probably some people that, have that concern, and like, I think like if you just don't trust other people, you'd expect that to happen. But yeah, I've been really happy to see that at least in our class, people don't have that mentality. It's very much not seen as a situation where helping other people study is a situation where you're worsening your own situation, which I think is good.
Yeah, so it's entirely possible that they're cutthroat medical students. We have 175 kids total between the PAs and the medical students that are in all of our preclinical courses. I probably interact on a regular basis with maybe 50 of them, and all of them have been more than happy to help me out or to discuss our study habits or things like that. So at least here, Iowa is definitely the place to go if you like collaborative learning.
How about this one? You've either got empathy or you don't. You can't be taught empathy, or you can't learn empathy. Is this a myth?
I think it is. I think empathy is a skill that can be improved upon. I think it's also fair to say that like all skills, you might be born with a specific deficit, right? And it could be to the point that it is pathological, just like any other skill, right? If I have a muscle weakness that it's so severe that I can't interact with the world, then we would call that pathological. If I have a deficit in empathy that is so severe that I can't communicate well with other people, that's different. But I think for the average person, you have a range of ability when it comes to empathy, and you can work on that. Or you can choose not to and just say, or whatever your phrase du jour is, but like, God made me this way. I don't have to change. I can just be a jerk to everybody.
I think the thing I was thinking of when I wrote this down was, there are levels of empathy that you have. So you can, I think it's common for people to have empathy among people who are like them, and somewhat less common to have empathy for people who are not like them. And I think part of it comes from, just spending a minute to think about what it might be like to be not you.
So I would make the argument that like this is a perfect example of an exercise you can do to improve your empathy. Who isn't like you? Turns out everybody is in some form or fashion very much like you.
Yeah.
But it takes a little bit of sometimes imagination and effort to see that.
Yeah, I feel like that's the work that you have to put into to empathy. To be truly empathetic means to be able to put yourself in somebody's place, even when that place is foreign to you, or at least to not make judgments on people who whose situation you're unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an important component of empathy, because your perspective is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be, you're not always going to be as open to other experiences as you might want to be, but to recognize that and to make sure that you're, doing your best to stay open is pretty important.
One I like to do is radiologists never see patients. They just sit in a dark room all day. Not true. Not just interventional radiologists who are kind of clinical, but like diagnostic radiologists are doing biopsies a lot, and they'll see patients, doing procedures in and out throughout the day. Kind of varies by your practice. There are some radiologists who sit at home and just do their work, but there are a lot of hospital-based ones who they see, patients daily and have to talk to them and interact with them, and they're just as personable as other people. So particularly for people considering careers in medicine, like radiology doesn't mean you have to hide yourself away in a dark room. It's got a good blend for some people.
Is that the last myth?
I'll be honest with you guys. I came with specific medical myths, not the culture of medicine myths. And so I'm sitting over here thinking about drug interactions.
That's all I got is the culture of medicine. I can't reasonably.
No, I think these are very valuable for people that are considering this field, right? But
yeah, there's probably a lot more that we didn't speak of either. Things like, doctors only work in certain settings,
or all doctors are in the pocket of big pharma and they'll do whatever the drug companies say, right?
Right. Or nurses and physicians assistants are just there to serve doctors, and they don't have their own sort of expertise and scope of practice.
Yeah, or that nurses and doctors are constantly at odds with one another. I think that's a fun myth that we're two rival gangs or something. I don't know.
Only straight A students can be doctors.
Oh gosh.
I mean,
I
think that's the most harmful myth.
I'm not going to release my high school transcripts, but let me tell you.
I think that's among the more harmful myths for people trying to get, hoping to get into medicine is no, that's not, you don't have to have perfect grades. You don't have to have a perfect MCAT. You don't have to be a particular vision of a perfect medical student. So I don't know. I think about that.
The reverse corollary too, just because you have perfect grades doesn't mean you have to go to medical school.
Or doesn't mean that you will be a great doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that you can even get in, to be honest with you.
Yeah. We've talked about that many times. Well, all right. If you have any myths that you would like to share with us that we did not cover, listeners, send us messages 347-SHORT-CT. Send an email to theshortcoats@gmail.com, and we'll talk about it on the show. Shortcoats, if you're enjoying our conversation today, I'd be grateful if you'd let people know by posting a story on Instagram or Facebook or tweeting about us. And don't forget to tag us in your post.
Thank you.
Talia, early in the show, you mentioned, I think it was in the show, you'd mentioned being awkward.
Yeah, I might have said something like that. Yeah.
Medicine is a field of human interaction, can have many instances of awkwardness as we navigate communicating in a human way, full of, misspoken words and sometimes speaking before thinking. As a medical student, part of your subjective clinical evaluations is based on your impression management skills and the ability to clearly communicate. Particularly Mason and Talia, how do you handle sort of these occasional moments of awkwardness with grace? Can you think of any times where you walked into a patient room and just said something so dumb? Or
immediately.
Do you want to hear about probably my most embarrassing moment of med school?
I'd love that.
So this is on my OB-GYN rotation. And, over time, I think doctors develop little scripts for how they go through things, especially more sensitive topics. And I'll just say I was still working on it, So this was my second or third pap smear ever. And I'm like, okay, well, I should tell the patient what I'm about to do, but I don't want to use anything too, medical terminology. So what I said was, okay, I'm going to spread your lips now. And I was like, woo, immediately in my head, I'm like, that was not the right thing to say, but I'm like, just keep it cool, just keep going. So, got the speculum in, did the pap, everything else went fine, found the cervix on the first go, which felt like quite an accomplishment. But yeah, anyway, so coming out of the room, so we go back, me and the attending go back to this shared room with all the other students, residents, and attending. And she kind of says, oh yeah, by the way, like, never say to a patient, I'm going to spread your lips now. Like, that's just weird. You want to make it as normal as possible. And I melted into the floor. I was like, I'm so sorry. What should I say instead? And she's like, just say, you're going to feel my touch. And so, yeah, I mean, that is seared into my brain now. I just say, you're going to feel my touch. But yeah,
what a fantastic anecdote.
I have never felt so much empathy for a medical student.
Thank you.
I love that the attending was kind, but also like just did that in front of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably something where she's like, I want to make sure you know this, and just in clinic, you're kind of rushed. You don't always have time to like, okay, let's go have this discussion in private. So like, I get it, but it was very
just like, hey Talia, can you just like be less awkward, please?
Yeah, it was very embarrassing.
Anybody? Yeah. Do you have a similar thing that you cringe about?
I don't. I've definitely gotten like moments where like I start like tripping over my words because I'm like talking too fast, but that's like the worst I've had. Yeah. Or when things do come up, like usually like humor is a good deflection that you kind of win people back with. Of like, I mean, I've done the thing of I've walked into a clinic room prepared for the wrong patient and like quickly realized it, and you're like, oh, because you're like, oh, how'd your surgery go last month? They're like, what? I was like, awesome. This is not the same person.
Well, that's a little awkward because like the patient expects you to have looked at a chart and learn some things about them, and turns out you did the wrong.
I was just like, oh, that was someone else I saw frantically log into Epic and start quickly scan their notes as we're kind of chatting about what's going on. But yeah, that it happens, and I think you just kind of learn like to roll with the punches. I think people are understanding like that we make mistakes, but if you like double down, you're like, no, you had a surgery last month. If you make it even weirder, like that's never gonna go well for you. I think you just gotta reflect and be like, yeah, I made a mistake, and we'll move on.
Our producer AJ Chowdhury sent me some examples, and this one reminds me of that situation. So you're on a surgery rotation and you're starting your day with the med student task of interrupting patients' peaceful sleep at 4:30 a.m. to ask about their bowel movements. Having been primed to go through your default list in under a minute to get to the OR on time to annoy the scrub tech with your existence, you go in to check on your patient, on your POD. I'm not really sure what that means. Post-op day 1, bilateral below knee amputation patient. While running through your list of questions, you ask your patient if they have been able to walk around yet. That seemed a little extreme to me, but I bet it could happen.
It's super easy mistake because they're in bed, sheets over their legs. You may not realize like exactly what you're seeing them for. You're seeing a bunch of patients in the morning. That it's really easy to just kind of like use that canned phrase. So I've changed my canned phrase to, have you been up and out of bed? Because that at least gets to like, been working with PT to like maybe get up in the chair and stuff, and that can give me some of that functional info. But yeah, it's a super understandable mistake that for the person who now has a bilateral below knee amputation kind of seems like a massive oversight in their care. Like I think I'd be kind of thrown off by that if one of my providers asked if I could walk after I just had a surgery to take off both my legs.
Yeah, I wonder how you would recover from. I would just like turn around and leave. Let me go get somebody competent, please.
Just make eye contact with them, just like, excuse me for a moment, and then just never come back. So we have not. So I'm a first year. We've not had a lot of patient experience, but we do have these early clinical experiences, or I don't know what.
Yeah.
And my first one was in neurology. I may have shared this story before. I'm a little older. I'm 30. And I have some gray in my facial hair, and I tend to wear this herringbone blazer around. People have mistaken me for faculty quite a few times. That said, I was on this ECE, and the resident, who did not really know who I was doing a neurological exam on a patient. For those of you that don't know, this involves a lot of like poking of the face and sticking out the tongue, and there are a lot of things where you're checking on cranial nerve symptoms, right? And he pimped me hard, like 8 or 9 questions of, why do we do this? What is this for? What would this sign tell you? And I had been in medical school for a few weeks at this point, right? So I'm, of course, just a deer in headlights. Just, I don't know.
Is this what this is going to be like?
Yeah, the whole time. And I was like really embarrassed. I was like, man, I really should have known this. And after he got done with his exam, I was supposed to talk to the patient about their feelings about coming in today and what was their chief complaint and all this stuff. And the patient just looked at me like, man, this guy's a straight up idiot. And I was walking out and the resident was trying to be nice about it, but he was like, you really do need to know all of that stuff for your shelf exams and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's like my first week, man. I don't know anything. He felt so bad. He thought I was a third year, but it is what it is. So that patient had no confidence in my ability to help them in any way, shape, or form. So.
And well, you didn't have the.
To be fair, that was a reasonable expectation to set, but it made the interview really awkward.
I'll say, I mean, so yeah, the two patient interactions we have ECE, then we have interviews with standardized patients. And I don't think I've had a single standardized patient interview in any context that hasn't been awkward in some way.
Yeah.
There's just something about it. Like, well, how do you close it not awkwardly? Do you say, okay, I'm going to leave now. I'll be back later? Do you just say, okay, bye?
You do the Porky Pig thing. That's all, folks.
We'll do like these like small group one-on-one interviews, but it's like you divide a one-on-one interview into like 3 parts and 3 different people do it. And nobody ever knows how to transition in and out of those, because what do you say? Like, I'm going to leave now and another medical student is going to come talk to you for the next part of this history. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's like, it's obviously low stakes because this is a standardized patient, but I'm just like, I'm not learning anything about
it does
how
seem
to
like
not be awkward with patients from this experience.
Yeah, it does seem like a guaranteed awkward encounter. I mean, in order to not be awkward, you have to have, rules to follow. And if there are no rules, if no rules exist for that situation, if you have not grown up with these rules, then it's gonna feel weird.
You see, now here's the problem. You know that the rules exist. You just don't know what the rules are.
Well, oftentimes that's true. Yeah.
Like we from birth are trained that there are rules in every social interaction. And most of the time we feel like we have a general grasp on what those rules are, right? Like I know the rules in my family. I know the rules with my classmates. I know that there are rules between me and my patient, and I just don't have a good grasp on them yet, and it's going to get weird.
But there are no rules for 3 people to pretend to be one med student in order to interview a simulated patient. I mean, that's just
anarchy.
Yeah, so sometimes
they should set things out, like just stop talking and point to the next person.
That's what I do. Honestly, I just say popcorn, and then I drop all pretense. It's weird. Let's just have fun with it.
Here's another scenario. It's grand rounds, and you are zooming into the presentation, being early enough in the day that you're still not fully awake, but late enough in the morning that you've had your coffee and the slightly suspicious cold breakfast casserole from the hospital cafeteria. You forget to mute yourself as the presentation begins. Suddenly, you feel a violent lurch in your stomach. Being that you're zooming in from an otherwise empty student workroom, you let that bad boy rip, only for everyone else in grand rounds to hear, and your face becomes the active speaker plastered on the big projector in the conference room. How do you recover from this in the 5 seconds you have before every run recognizes the grand rounds farter?
Log out.
What's that?
Log out immediately.
Yeah, this is actually an easy one, I feel like.
You just leave.
There's no saving face.
You can't. You can't. There should be like a 1-button log out, panic button feature for Zoom.
But then it can't say at the top so-and-so logged out, because if you fart and then log out, that's also a tough look.
Never use your real name when you're logging into Zoom.
Yeah, this is
somebody else's name.
You recently changed your name. Now is the time.
Yeah, this is true.
Nobody's going to recognize you.
You see, yeah. Any Zoom where they're not taking attendance, you just always change your name to somebody else because, it's the OG hedge.
That's our show. Talia, Jeff, Trent, Mason, thanks for being on the show with me today.
A pleasure.
And what kind of clumsy, ungainly, clunky, difficult, gawky, graceless host would I be if I didn't thank you, Shortcoats, for making us a part of your week? If you're new here and you like what you heard today, follow the show wherever fine podcasts are available: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Thanks to the producer of this episode, AJ Chowdhury. The show is made possible by a generous donation by Carver College of Medicine student government and ongoing support from the Writing and Humanities program. Our music is by Dr. Vox and Catmosphere. I'm Dave Etler saying, don't let the bastards get you down. Talk to you in 1 week. Hi, Shortcoats. Look, life in medical education, life in America, life in the world is often difficult. And I often wish I could help. All I have is this podcast, but in my wildest dreams, you have the support you need to lead a life of your choosing. You deserve to be happy, healthy, and successful in whatever ways you define those words. So if you need support because you've experienced racism, discrimination, harassment, mental health crises, I want you to be able to get the help that you need. And so I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some resources that you can use. But the bottom line is that for what it's worth, I see you. I know you're out there. I wish I could do more. Maybe I can in ways that I don't understand yet or know about. But I see you, and I'm glad you're here, and other people are too.
The Short Code Podcast is a proud member of the MedEd Media Network. Inspiration, information, and guidance on your journey to medical school and beyond at mededmedia.com.